and today I'm going to be going over my entire predictions for the NCAA Men's College Basketball Tournament for 2024. At this time, I'm recording it on the Tuesday prior to the playing games beginning, so that you can get my picks for all 68 games in the tournament, or all 68 teams, I should say, in the tournament. According to which Brandon Ward is in collaboration with the one, the only Voltage Live. My social media links are in the description below. Now, last year, we know that in the NCAA tournament, there were a ton of upsets. There were more upsets in that tournament than ever before. And we know the reason for that. And the reason for it is because there's not so many top level talent in college basketball anymore. Obviously, there are some very good players that come out of college, but most of the great players that are coming into the NBA are either from the G League or more specifically from overseas. So with that being said, there's a lot of parity in college basketball. Now this year we do have defending champion. Obviously, UConn is the number one seed. You have your Houstons, you have your Arizonas, your San Diego States, your Kentuckys, your Dukes. We'll see if Purdue can get over the hump this year. But with the talent as spread out as ever in college basketball, and with these veteran teams, a lot of these lower seeds have played together for 4 years, as opposed to the top seeds. They, have a lot of one and dones. That's where you get a lot of upsets in this tournament. So I do think, depending on the bracket, I do think that matters. I think we're going to get more upsets this year, and I think it will be a very entertaining 3-week tournament. I've argued now for the past few years that college basketball has turned into a 3-week sport. So let's dive into my predictions for the 2024 NCAA tournament. And if you're listening on video, you will see here on my screen that this is where we're going to fill out my only official. I do one bracket every year. This is my one official bracket, and we're going to go through it together. So we're going to start it off in the East here. UConn against Stetson. I am not picking a 16 seed upset on one like Purdue got upset last year. To me, it's just highly unlikely. Now, Florida Atlantic against Northwestern. As much as I do like Northwestern, Florida Atlantic, they got odd here towards the end of last year. Or towards the end of this year, I should say. They picked up a few key victories. I like the way they're playing. I'm gonna take Florida Atlantic. Now, in that matchup there, UConn against Florida Atlantic, I think that this could be a spot where UConn could get upset, but I think UConn, the balance of scoring, shooting, the defense, their length, their bench, their depth, I think it may just be too much for Florida Atlantic to overcome. So I will take UConn going all the way to the Sweet 16. Now, as to who they play, I want San Diego State to at least advance around, and I want, as much as I like Yale coming out of the Ivy League, where they struggled a little bit in the regular season, turned it on a little bit as they got to the conference tournament. I think Auburn has been battle tested. They have a ton of veteran experience. They went through a gauntlet of an SEC, which is no longer just a football conference. It's really turned into a basketball conference as well. Of course, Alabama's in there, LSU, Kentucky, your typical SEC teams. But I do think that again, Auburn, that they have guys that have played together a lot. 3 out of the last 4 years. I think that they are a really deep team. And so I think San Diego State this year does not go on a Cinderella run, that it will be UConn against Auburn in the Sweet 16 on the East side. And by the way, as much as I think that Auburn will give UConn a fight, and I think that this will be UConn's potential toughest challenge to get to the Final Four, I think, again, UConn's been the best team in college basketball all year round. And I think that as a number one seed, they will get to the Elite Eight, though I could very much see Auburn potentially getting there. Now, BYU against Tisnewski, I'm going to take BYU, and then Illinois against Morehead State. I'm going to take number 3 seed Illinois. That sets up 3 Illinois against 6 BYU. Again, Illinois is one of these teams that have played together 3 out of the last 4 years. The Big Ten is down this year. You know, it was only really Purdue, Nebraska, and Illinois, and obviously a little bit of Michigan State, who also made the tournament. But Illinois has size. They can shoot the ball. They get balanced scoring. I really like what they bring to the table. And BYU struggled a little bit when it came to ending the season. So I'm going to take number 3 Illinois here to move on to the Sweet 16. I do like Drake. You know, they were initially not going to be a part of the NCAA tournament. They really struggled in January, February. They are getting on at the right time. Washington State struggled in conference play. So I'm going to take Drake here as one of my only upsets, to be honest, in the East bracket. I think the East has the least amount of upsets. And I do think that Iowa State will dispatch of South Dakota State. Now, here's where I think an upset could potentially happen, which is Drake against Iowa State. Iowa State, they played very well in the Big 12 this year, but they did not, again, finish great in conference play. They did do very well in the conference tournament, but they feel like a team that is reliant on shooting. And if they get a bad shooting night, which I feel like they may against a very good defensive team in Drake, I do like Drake to overcome that. And I do like Drake here to knock off Iowa State. And it's going to be Illinois against Drake, I do believe, in the Sweet 16. And then that will lead us to Illinois then knocking off Drake in the Elite Eight matchup in the East. I believe will be UConn, number 1 seed against a number 3 seed in Illinois. But again, a good story here for Drake as a 10 seed that they were able to win 2 games and get to the Sweet 16. As much as I like Illinois, I think UConn will be the 1 seed that makes it to the Final Four there out of the East. Now, North Carolina versus Howard or Wagner. I'm going to go ahead and take North Carolina there in that contest. Mississippi State against Michigan State. I just don't trust Amijo and Michigan State. They're not as talented as teams in years past. I like Mississippi State. Now, St. Mary's, you know, they've been a team that's been in the tournament for a lot of years. They're a 5 seed this year, but they struggle sometimes to get out of a potential early round. And Grand Canyon has played very good and allowed themselves here in, you know, to mid-February to now to get a great stretch. And I do think that Grand Canyon will knock off St. Mary's. And then I also think Alabama, who took an early exit last year, obviously, due to the Brandon Miller circumstances, even though they are a number 4 seed, I don't think they're as talented as last year's team. And Charleston, believe it or not, has not lost since mid January. I really like the way Charleston plays. They play team basketball. Not only do I think they knock off Alabama as a 13 seed, but I also think they can knock off Grand Canyon here. And 13 seed Charleston is another sort of Cinderella story here as they get to the Sweet 16. Ultimately, I do think North Carolina will defeat Mississippi State. Then I think they will defeat Charleston. That gets North Carolina to the Elite Eight. Now, New Mexico is a very solid team. I think that again, they're one of these teams that were sort of on the bubble, but the way they play, the way they get hot in the conference tournament, and again, Clemson, you know, really struggling in that ACC late down the stretch. I think New Mexico as an 11 seed upsets Clemson. And then I do think that Colgate upsets Baylor, even though Baylor did very well in the Big 12. They struggled a little bit in the conference tournament, and Colgate is a team that historically, if they get in the tournament, they can create some noise. So I do think that Colgate against New Mexico is upset city here, potentially in the first round of the NCAA tournament to go to the round of 32. I think New Mexico will advance to the Sweet 16. Then you have Dayton against Nevada, and Dayton is one of those teams that doesn't matter what their seeding is, they typically do struggle in the NCAA tournament. For that reason, I'm going to take Nevada and I will have them go up against Arizona, who I think is a very good team, but I don't think that they're as good as a number two seed. They limped a little bit down the stretch. They had an opportunity to get the number one seed in this tournament. They did not do that. Well, I think they do defeat Nevada. I like New Mexico to upset Arizona, get to the Elite Eight, and play North Carolina. So I think number one, North Carolina, number 11, New Mexico in the West is your Elite Eight matchup. And UNC is a very good basketball team. I think that they will be the other number one seed in my bracket. So I do have number one UConn against number one North Carolina from the West, and obviously the East bracket. Now we need to go to the South bracket, which we will see Houston against Longwood. I'll take Houston. I don't trust Houston that much, but I do think that they have one of the easier brackets as a number one seed because I don't like Nebraska, North Texas A&M. I do think that Nebraska can win a game, but I don't think they could beat Houston. Again, neither one of those two teams are great. I think a team that could shock the world is James Madison. A lot like Drake and a lot like Charleston. James Madison ran through their conference. They have not lost since early February. Wisconsin, gave a little bit of struggle there towards the end of the season in the Big Ten Conference. So this is going to shock you. Not only do I like James Madison, but I like Vermont against Duke. To me, Duke is a four seed, but they don't have the top tier and talent that they had in years past. They have a couple of lottery projected, but no one really in the top 10 for the NBA draft. And I think Vermont can knock off Duke. I think James Madison then will knock off Vermont, and I think James Madison will also knock off Houston as the number one seed. Houston goes down in the Sweet 16. James Madison advances to the Elite Eight. Now, it's who do they play? North Carolina State, I think they're better than Texas Tech, but I am a little worried about their ability to win consecutive, March Madness games based on because they got a lot of people in the transfer portal, right? And that's sort of a big story now in college basketball. How will they play? I'll take an upset here against Texas Tech, but I do think after Kentucky disposes of Oakland, Kentucky then will dispose of NC State. Now, I don't love the way Florida finished. I think Boise State, even though they struggled, I could see them losing to Colorado in sort of that play-in tournament game. And I like the way that Colorado's playing. I think that they could knock off Florida, and then, but I don't think that they're going to be able to knock off Marquette, who I think will also defeat Western Kentucky, and that will lead to Marquette against Kentucky in the Sweet 16. This is a very good matchup. It's one of the best matchups in the tournament. I think both of these teams could be defending champions. I just think Kentucky's pedigree as a number three seed as well. Kentucky will take on James Madison in the Elite Eight, a 3 versus 12, and Kentucky then will become the representative of the South as a number three seed. Now, in the Midwest, I think it's possible Purdue gets knocked off pretty early. I think they'll rebound. I don't think they're going to lose to a 16 seed again. I think TCU has gained momentum at the end of the year. That will set up Purdue against TCU. I do think Purdue can defeat TCU, so I do think that they will get to the Sweet 16. The problem is McNeese is one of the hottest teams in the country. And so not only do I think that they can knock off Gonzaga, not only do I think they can knock off Kansas after obviously um Kansas would defeat Samford, but I think McNeese then could get to the Elite Eight by knocking off Purdue. It's one of those teams that have not lost really besides a couple games since the calendar has turned to 2024. Oregon, a team that out of the very tough Pac-12, one of the best conferences in college basketball, was not expected to make the tournament. They went on a late year surge, and as I keep talking about, I always like that as we head into the tournament. But my favorite team in this tournament overall is Creighton. I think they're undervalued as a 3. I think they should have at least been a 2 seed. They have great size, great scoring, ability to make free throws. For all 4 years of talent, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I think Creighton is one of the most complete teams in the country. So I will take Creighton there. And then while I'm gonna take Texas, I don't think that they could beat Tennessee, who I think will knock off St. Peter's, but I think Creighton will then knock off Tennessee, which leads us to a Creighton against McNeese Elite Eight. I talked about how much I love Creighton. I think the final four will be UConn against North Carolina, a 1 seed battle, and also a 3 seed battle between Kentucky and Creighton. I think Creighton will then go on to play North Carolina in the championship. I don't think UConn makes it there. I think they'll fall in the final four. And ultimately, I do think Creighton will win the NCAA College Basketball 2024 championship. Again, I just think that they have been battle tested. They have taken out everybody that's come their way. They're very balanced, and they just play great, solid team basketball. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.